Hi, I'm Chris from Development. In the previous video on using Coronium Pages, we put together a form and we submitted it. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to continue on with that example, and we're going to take the form data here that we're getting and actually post it into the database. And in your Pages modules, or in the Lua, the code that you create for your page, you can also reference all of the server modules. And so we're going to just use the simple data module to save some data to the Mongo database. So we're going to do that by just referencing those module methods directly. So we have this first and last name. So what we can do is we can go ahead at this point and then just create a reference to our users. And that's going to be using the core data. So we're going to say core data users. And then we just want to save this data to the user's database. So there's two ways we can do it. We can go ahead and just put these into a table and then push it. But more simply, since this form is already in a table state, we can actually just push that directly to the data module. So we're going to get back an ID and an error when we use this. So we're going to say users save, and then we're going to just pass the page.form. And then we should probably check for an error. So if we don't get an ID back, then let's respond appropriately. Error in submission. And then if not, let's go ahead and say else. Let me clean some of this up here real quick. Okay, if we don't get the ID, we're going to say error in submission, but if we do get it, we're going to say page.response ID was, and then we can go ahead and just tack that on there. So we checked if we have our form. We're not really using these pieces here. We can actually just, for the example, let's get rid of them. We're checking if we have a form. If we do, then we're going to go ahead and get a reference to our users data store here. And then we're going to save it, which is going to give us back an ID or an error. And if we don't get the ID back, here, let me actually tag on the error as well. Then if we don't get an ID back, we're going to respond with there's an error, and then it's going to show the error. But if we do, then we're just going to respond with the ID. So let's go ahead and save that up and push it to the server. And we got our submission there. So let's go back to our form again. We'll go refresh our form here. And we'll pass some data to that. So let's say Danny6. And we get our ID back, so that means that we've definitely stored our data, which is nice. I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, so we'll utilize it here in another test. So I'm over here. I'm just going to store this down here for a second. And so this is was our submission, and then so it saved it to the database, which is cool. So let's go ahead and create another page here. We'll just put it here in the root. We're just going to call this display. And we can run a quick test here on grabbing that data. So we need a page object. So that's core.pages.new. And then we're going to go ahead and grab that data back. So I'm going to get a reference to the users collection here. And that's core.data users. And then we can get that doc or an error. So we'll say users get. And the get method can take a Mongo query or the ID directly. So we'll go ahead and grab that ID that I stuffed down here. And we'll pass that as a string. And again, we should check for errors. So if we don't get the doc back, we're going to go ahead and do a page.response. No doc found. We could tack on the error. We're not going to do that this time. And then else, we will respond with some data from this object. So we'll say response name. What did we have? First name, yeah. So we'll just say name, and then we'll tack on the doc.first name, and then the last name. Okay, so that should hopefully give us what we want. We're going to go ahead and push this, and we're just going to put that in the root here. So let's do display Lua here in the root, and then we should be able to call it here on the root of our site display, and it went ahead and pulled that data for us, and then it's showing the first and last name that we had stored. So that kind of shows a round trip methodology for utilizing the data module inside Pages. One other interesting thing that you might need to use every once in a while is the redirect. So let's say you submitted a form, you've collected the data, and then you want to push the client to a different page. You can do that by using the redirect method of the Page API, and this is under redirect. So to do that, it's pretty simple. Let's just go ahead and do something simple. You can redirect into pages into your website locally by just pathing to them, or you can also push the client out to an external site. So we'll just go ahead and push them out to Google. So we're going to create another Lua file here in the base, the root directory here, and we'll just call this just go Lua. And we need a page reference, so core.pages, new, and then this is a really simple one. We're just going to do a redirect straight out, so redirect page.redirect, and then give it a endpoint here. Again, if you wanted to redirect somewhere within your own server, then say we wanted to push them to the display page or something, then you would use just the pathing relative to the pages directory. So we would say we want to go to display, so we would say display. Again, you don't put the .lua on your path. If you do, it won't allow you to do that. And another thing to note too, when you're using templates, you should always use the .tpl extension. Those are blocked from being displayed through the browser, so they kind of protect those. And .lua is also protected from being displayed in the browser as well. So we're going to go back to where we were. We're going to go to our Google endpoint. This is a redirect, so let's go ahead and push this up to the server. And this is in our root here. So once we go back to the browser, we should be able to use the Go endpoint, and it should push us directly out to Google. So that's how you use redirect if you need to. And let's see, anything else? So the other thing that you can do also is if you while you can use the built-in server modules within your Pages code, if you have any custom API modules that you've built, you can actually reference those too by using the call API on the page object. And it takes the project name, the method you want to run, the endpoint basically, and then you can pass it data if it requires data. So I believe we have a project up here already, so let me just double check where this guy is. And yeah, so we have this test project, and it actually has an echo function in there, I think, just called test. So let's go back into our pages here, and we'll just do a quick example of that. We'll create another page here in our root, and we'll just call this API Lua, and then we're going to get a page here. And we're going to use the call API method on this, so we're going to get a result or an error. So we'll do page call API, and our project name was test. The method we want to call on it, I believe, was test. Let me double check this. Yeah, we have test. It probably should be called echo, but it's what it is. Test, and then we can pass some data that we want to echo. So name equals Tim. We should probably do a check for this, so if you don't get the result, then you're going to respond with some kind of error. Let's say it didn't work, and then else we'll go ahead and pass this back. So if we get an echo back, then we should, in this case, since it's extremely simple, we'll just get the name back. So we'll just say name, and then we'll put result.name. And so if it makes this call here, it's just going to round trip back and then give us the value back, and then we're just going to respond it. So let's go ahead and push that up to the FTP. This is again in the root of our pages directory, and so we path to it accordingly. So this will be API, and we call this, and we made a round-trip call through one of our own custom APIs on the server, and then we got that data back. So that gives a pretty solid overview on some of the main things you'll want to be using when you're building with the Coronium Core Pages API. In the documentation, though, it definitely goes into more detail and all the kind of different nuances and a bunch of different properties you have available to you when you're using it. Also, how to respond with different content types, add headers, etc., etc. But that gives you the basics on how to work with the Pages API. It's pretty cool. You can collect data and display data that you've pushed through your Corona app using Coronium Core. So there's definitely a lot of useful pieces of functionality for that. I should note that the Pages API isn't really built to kind of build entire websites with. It's kind of a complement to Coronium Core, the client side. So while you can probably do some pretty advanced stuff with it, it's not really necessarily for that. It's just meant to display your data and collect some data, etc. Thanks for watching.